everyone, my name is Elaine, and today I'm here with Jeremy to help explain how to play The Witches and also to give it a review. The Witches is a game that's set in Terry Pratchett's Discworld. It basically surrounds the life of the witches, like it suggests. In this game, you play competitively with up to 3 other people, and you play the role of one of the witches in training, such as Tiffany Aching or Petulia Gristle. Your training takes place in Lancre, so you basically travel around Lancre and you solve problems, because the world has lots of problems. It might be something simple like curing a sick pig, or it might be something a little more complex like dealing with the Hiver. What problems will you face? Let's find out and learn how to play The Witches.
The Witches is a simple, fun, and thematic game set in the world designed by Terry Pratchett, the Discworld, and more specifically in the city-state of Lancre. In the game, you take on the role of one of these witches in training that you can see right here, and you are attempting to travel around Lancre and solve various problems. These problems range in difficulty from the green ones to the purple ones, the green ones being easy, the purple ones being hard, and they range in their various types. So like broken limbs, sick sheeps, sick pig, another broken limb, death. You gotta cure death. More sick sheeps, fevers. Got a lot of stuff going on that you have to travel around and fix. First, I'm going to go over what you do on your turn, and then I'll get into the more specific elements on how you're going to solve the problems that you encounter along the way. Your turn is broken up into 3 phases. The first phase is where you're going to place the problem tile for that turn. So you take the top card, you flip it over, and at the bottom it's going to have a location. That is where you are going to place the problem tile this turn. So you're going to take the tile, you're going to flip it over, if it's a green one, and you're going to place it in that section. So this one says the long man, so this one gets placed in the long man. After you have placed the problem tile for the turn, you then have to move your witch. So you can move your witch up to 2 spaces. So that's taking 2 individual move actions. So say you're here, you can move to Lancre Town, and then you can move to Cab's Well right there. So that's your move. The other way of moving is, you see this little symbol here, the broomstick symbol on the top there. If you play one of those cards, that allows you to move anywhere on the board. After you complete your movement, you then take a secondary action. You have to take one of the secondary actions, and I'll get to that in a minute. But after you've done your secondary action, the last phase of your turn is to draw up to your maximum hand limit. Your hand limit starts at 3, and then every 2 problems that you solve of the easy type, you will gain a new limit for your hand. It'll go up by 1, and you get up to a maximum of having 7 cards in your hand. Now, what are those secondary actions I mentioned? I'm going to start with the easy ones and then move on to the one that everybody cares about. The first one you have the choice to do is nothing. If you are on a space that does not have any other witches on it and is empty, you don't have to do anything. The second option you have, or it's not really an option, if you land on a space with another witch, you have to have tea. It's etiquette after all. And if you have tea with another witch, you're able to discard up to 3 of your cackle counters, and we'll get into cackle counters in a little while. The last secondary action you have is if you land on a space that has a problem tile on it, you have to try and solve the problem. How do we go about solving the problem? If you look at the problem tiles, they have the point value for the end of the game, and they have the value, this is kind of the difficulty value. So you have to roll dice, your witch's die, to try and overcome that number. So in the case of this one, the fever, so I roll the dice, I roll 2 at a time, you have 4, and say I rolled a 5. And that would put me in good shape that I think with the second set of dice I'm going to be able to roll it, but I'm not exactly certain. So what do I do if I'm not certain? If I have cards in my hand that have these symbols on them, symbol right here, the magic symbol, or the headology symbol, I can add value to my die rolls in between the 2 sets of die. This is the only time during the turn that you're able to add value to it, though. So this one would add 2 to my dice roll, but I have to take a cackle counter, which is one of these over here. And this one would add 1, and I don't have to take a cackle counter. So let's say I add my 1 here with this headology card. Now I roll the other set of dice. And wow, I rolled really well here. So I really didn't need that headology card. But so now I've beaten the 7. And I take this and I put it on my board here. You can fit 2 per space. And it's moving towards leveling up my hand. As I beat difficult problems, I get added value to my dice rolls down here. Each space is worth +1 on my dice rolls because the tiles that are purple are a lot harder. Those are the basic fundamentals of the game, but I do want to go over a couple specific things. I want to go over cackle counters. These you can get multiple ways. You can get them by rolling these, you can also get them by using magic cards. There's other effects that give you cackle counters. So, cackle counters by themselves only function as a tiebreaker at the end of the game. If you have less and you're tied score-wise with another player, then you would be the one who loses if you have more cackle counters. If you have less, that's the tiebreaker, so you would win. But the big thing about cackle counters is if the supply ever runs out and you need to draw a cackle counter and take one into your supply, you have to draw one of these instead, which is bad. The black anise tiles, and they're worth -1 at the end of the game. So those are really bad. You really don't want those. The other specific tile I want to go over is this. This is the crisis tile. If you add the crisis tile to something, it adds +2 difficulty to that challenge. Why would you ever want to add one of these? So this happens if you draw a card to place a problem tile and it has a location that already has a problem tile. So say another one of these came out and it says the long man. We already placed one on the long man, so we'd have to place a +2 tile on it to make it more difficult. Now instead of a 7, so this is the same tile, instead of a 7 you would need a 9 because it adds that +2 there. Another specific element to this game is the power of 3. If you play 3 power of 3 cards, you're able to overcome any challenge. So if you look right here, these are what they look like. They have to be different members of the power of 3, but if you play those and you play them out of your hand, it's really good because you can take on those strong challenges when you don't think you have any other way of beating it. So what happens if a problem tile ends up being too challenging for you? Say you roll that first set of die and you roll something that you don't like, that you don't think you'll be able to beat it. You can choose to run away. That requires you to move to the next nearest open space. So like say here, you can move to the next nearest open space. It can't contain a witch and it can't contain a problem tile. And that's all that happens there. If you choose to continue forward and you still fail the challenge, you then have to do that retreating as well as take a cackle counter. If you're going up against a hard tile, there also might be a consequence that might be noted on the back page of the rule book here that goes into more specifics on each tile and what happens if you lose. Some of them have really nasty effects. So how does the game end? The game can end in one of 3 ways. First way is you have to place a crisis token and you're not able to. The second one is if you end up having 3 elves, so like this guy's an elf, Link and the elf, face up on the board at any time. That's a bad thing. So there's elf tiles in there, and if they're ever face up at the same time, ends the game. And the other way is if you go through all of the problem tiles here. So if you go through all those tiles, then you end the game after the active turn and count up the points. Most points wins. Tiebreaker goes to the cackle counters, like I was saying before. Now that you know how to play the game, I'm going to meet you back up top, and we'll talk about our final thoughts on the game.
Now that you guys know all about the premise of the game and how to play, I want to take some time to give it a review. I feel like I appreciated this game a lot more when I first purchased it and started playing than I do now. And I feel like that's because it's a very good introductory game or gateway game and not really as good a game for people who play tabletop games and board games more regularly. What do I mean by that? I feel like this is the kind of game that's on the level of something like a Castle Panic or a Ticket to Ride. Something that helps newer gamers get accustomed to a slightly more complex game on, let's say, a party game or one of your simpler card games. Something that helps them build up endurance to play more games and play longer games so you can play more advanced games. But not something that's particularly complex or necessarily as entertaining for someone who is a more experienced gamer. From the standpoint of how this relates to the books that have the witches, so everything from the Tiffany Aching series to Masquerade and Witches Abroad, all of those books, it does a fairly good job. All the trainees in this game are actual witch trainees. Tiffany Aching is a trainee. Petulia Gristle is known for being a pig boar. These are all characters in this series, but they don't necessarily combat the problems that they're facing in this game. So, for example, Tiffany faces the Hiver. That's one of the things she does in A Hatful of Sky. So if you're Petulia Gristle and you encounter the Hiver, you weren't the person who beat that. That was a Tiffany thing. Little things like that. All of the smaller problems, for the most part, are things that the trainees would encounter. So dealing with a sick pig, dealing with the dying, things like that are things they would deal with. Obviously, Anagramma came to that a little later because she was trained by Mrs. Awidge, and she's a little more wizardly than witchy, if you will. But overall, this does stick to the Discworld pretty well. Lancre is a real place. All of the witches at some point trained in that area. Tiffany included, even though she grew up on the chalk. So that works really, really well. I feel like the components for this game are pretty strong. Everything is well made. I'm not the biggest fan of the artwork, however, but I mean, that's more of a personal thing. I think the colors are nice, but the art is very simplistic and like unattractive cartoony, which doesn't really appeal to me very much. Price point wise, I think I paid about $40, which is kind of what I expect to pay for a game like this. But again, for me, because it's an introductory game, it wouldn't be something I would buy again at this point in my life. It is pretty shelf friendly. It is pretty table friendly. You don't need a particularly big table to play this game, and it's not going to break the bank. But because of my experience playing so many games and how much I've grown since I first started playing games, I don't feel like I can appreciate this the way I used to. Even though I do like the Discworld, and I just reread the whole series recently, this just isn't something I feel I can give as good a rating as I might have once done. When I first started playing the game, I think I would have given it maybe like a 7 or an 8, but now I don't feel like I can give it anything better than a 5. It's just, for me, not something that engrosses me like it used to. And there you have it. Now you know how to play the game, and you have our review. If you like what you saw here today, even if you've played this game, let us know down below in the comments. We always like to know what you guys think. Smash that like button until it's blue. Subscribe, ring that bell so you'll know what's up, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Bye, guys.